Hello, everyone. Arab Spring, is it hitting South Africa? I mean, I suppose we have to change the name because we're not Arabic by any means. But for those who might not know, the Arab Spring happened in 2011 in the northern Arab countries like Syria and Algeria and Tunisia, where basically the government couldn't control the price of bread and the price of cooking oil and the price of fuel. And therefore, the people revolted. And yeah, after that, the country just got worse, if we really, really honest. So
Mm.
apparently, according to Thabo Mbeki, according to Julius Malema, the conditions for the Arab Spring or something similar in South Africa are there. So, Byron, the only question we might have for us at the moment is, will there be an Arab Spring in South Africa? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this all followed on from Thabo Mbeki basically issuing a press statement whereby he says that this came down to Cyril, because Cyril said during the State of the Nation that he would spend 100 days to create an economic plan to create jobs in the country. That economic plan was supposed to be done on the 1st of June, never happened. And then obviously it was extended, and now it still hasn't happened. So Thabo Mbeki basically said, well, sounds like Cyril's talking cuck. And it does sound like Cyril's talking cuck. And he says, if Cyril doesn't get his act in order, we could face an Arab Spring of our own due to the discontent of the unemployed and the starving masses. He said so. He said that ANC really need to get their hand together and their act together and do something about the economy. Um, so as you know, in typical fashion, the ANC's plan to fix the economy is to redistribute it and tax it to oblivion. So we can all expect that great things are going to happen with the ANC's economic policy, which clearly isn't happening. And as a result, everybody is now it's now on the lips of everybody. It was on in the policy conference that just went by. A number of people asked the president, like, "What about this plan? Like, what's going on?" And he says, "Well, it's not that easy because we're trying to get big business to agree some stuff, and they're not really kind of playing ball, mainly because big business has learned to call the government's bullshit and
Yeah,
realize the government are actually talking crap."
that's for sure.
And actually, we can talk about that in a minute. And actually, I can tell you what the big contentious issue is, and it's actually fascinating. Um, I don't mean fascinating from our side. I mean fascinating because it's typical of the government. But so they were basically saying, "Is Thabo Mbeki right? Do you have no plan for the economy?" And the answer was ultimately no. The ANC don't. So a lot of people are then saying, okay, well, if you don't have a good plan to stimulate the economy, does that mean that this call, which he's got for an Arab Spring, is that actually realistic, especially given in light of what we saw last year in July? And a lot of people are now saying, well, we can kind of see his point, and yeah, that the conditions for an Arab Spring are there. And it was
Yeah.
with that in mind that the lefty media, BBC, interviewed good friend Julius Malema, who seems like he has survived his kidnapping ordeal. We know that he was kidnapped. The poor brother was kidnapped and
Yep.
was surrounded by whiteys for a wedding. And he seems to have come out of it, and they seem to have released him to do an interview with the BBC. And this was the main topic of the interview. I know you've seen a bit about the interview, have you not, Ramon?
Unfortunately, I have. So basically, Julius Malema says the conditions are ripe for an Arab Spring in South Africa. And unfortunately, well, or fortunately for him, he says the whites will be the primary targets because they control all the wealth. So the usual nonsense
Mm.
from Julius Malema. But just go back to Thabo Mbeki quickly. I mean, I think it's very rich for this guy to talk about an Arab Spring when he was the one that set the conditions for the Arab Spring for South Africa today. Because Brian Pottinger wrote a great piece, and I just want to read a little bit from it when, during Thabo Mbeki's tenure as president of this country, he disbanded the country's the Scorpions, for example. He introduced the sort of state-sanctioned BEE extraction of wealth stuff based on black empowerment, and also he really was the mastermind of cater deployment and actually deploying it into the public and private sector. So Thabo Mbeki is like the architect of what the state is, South Africa today. Like Zuma and Cyril are just following suit from him. But of course, him and Cyril don't get along very well because they were competing for the presidency in 1999. or even a bit before then. So therefore, he's quite happy to like sling a few arrows into Cyril when necessary. It makes me think that maybe Mbeki has a trick or two up his sleeves come the National Elective Conference in December of this year. But anyway,
Mm.
Byron, the real fundamental question and the real fundamental problem with this question of is an Arab Spring happening in South Africa is like, yes, mate, every single fucking day. Like, don't people like know what's happening in the country right now? Like, Tbilisi is on fire.
Mm.
We had July riots. There's 30 service delivery protests every single day. There's 70 murders a day. Every single day, some form of state infrastructure is burning. Every single day, there's anarchy everywhere. There's chaos. There's everything. Like the Arab Spring has arrived, my friend. Like it's not organized like the one in Tunisia because we can't organize shit in South Africa. But every single day is an
Mm.
Arab Spring in South Africa. It's a lawless society. So I don't know what these people are on about.
Yeah, so I mean, I think what was interesting by the whole kind of Arab Spring argument which he raised, he basically said that in his mind, what he meant was an overthrow of the government. Now, obviously, that gets Julius a little bit exciting, which you saw in the documentary, because he's basically like, all the great communist revolutions started with a revolutionary act. And in his mind, it's like if we have this big Arab Spring, that would basically be like the big kind of, workers' revolution or something like that, where they would just kind of like overthrow the existing government, and all of a sudden we'd have this socialist kind of, class in place. So Juju's like all for it. And as you say, the conditions are there on a daily basis. Now, what became interesting in the target is when he said the white people in the interview, he said the white people would be the first that would be targeted. They said to him, "Are you actually like trying to incite violence against white people?" And he says, "No." He says, I'm a politician, so I'm negotiating with the guys every day. I'm trying to go through peaceful democratic means. But when the revolution comes, the revolution comes, and he's like, I can't control them. People will see that the whiteys is having all the money, and therefore they'll go after the whiteys. And he's like, that's just how it's going to be. And you know what? Like a lot of people on our comments section on some of our videos were like, "Oh, what do you think of this?" And I can't actually dispute what the guy's saying. What he's saying is
Okay.
true. The majority of people think that the whiteys have the money, and they probably will come after the white-owned businesses in their bit of redistribution, even though the whites technically don't have that much wealth anymore.
Yeah, I actually disagree with him completely. I think, as we've seen in the past, especially during the July riots, people attacked those closest to them, irrespective of who they were.
Mm,
Black, Indian, white, doesn't really matter. Very few people took like a 20-kilometer journey to go loot white areas. Like it just didn't happen.
mhm,
Like the place next to the white areas went to the white areas because they knew that there was more lucre them for their
mm.
there to steal. The fundamental problem with South Africa is there is no state to overthrow. There is no state. Like
True.
the problem we face is not a violent coup. The problem we face is decay.
Mm,
Decay is the main thing we are fighting against. And decay can be prevented or negated if you got the money and resources and things like that. So if you have, once again, communal living, off the grid, your own water, your own electricity supply, and you collate that with those around you, you can live extremely well here. And you'll be defended from Arab Spring pretensions from anyone in your
mm,
general vicinity. But
mhm,
Brian Pottinger said, the cantonizing of the country is already happening and still largely around apartheid era geographical divisions, which is true for the most
mhm,
part. So the threat, it's like my argument is his, the threat is therefore not popular uprising, but decay. Social, economic, political, and cultural decay. Just like the old
mm.
days. Like we've been through this on at least 3 occasions in the last 100 years. There was no violent
Yeah.
revolution anywhere. And it can't
And
happen.
I said that we would just And I said we would return to this. So, what is prohibiting the social compact between big business and the government? Well, I'm sure this comes as zero surprise. So, one of the major things actually around labor. So, obviously, is the government deregulating labor? No. What they're actually saying is that what they want is businesses, when they employ people, to basically not be able to fire them. regardless of how good or bad they are, or even whether the business is in trouble. So they want to get minimum guarantees of employment rates on big business, and then once those people are employed, they should just stay there. I suppose a little bit like the public sector, really. So what they want is big businesses to be run like the public sector. And obviously, big businesses are like, nah, we don't work that way. If we need to downscale because the business isn't doing well, we need to be able to get rid of these people. The government's like, nah, you need to keep those people because what we're trying to do is make the unemployment numbers go down. And if you sacking people because your business is failing, well, that's not going to help us bring the unemployment rate down. So
Yeah.
yeah, apparently that led on yesterday to one of the really a really interesting article being pushed forward by Propaganda 24, where they said this compacting thing, is it actually just a load of nonsense which the president keeps referring to and actually doesn't mean anything? What do you think, Ramon?
Oh, geez, I wonder. We had 5 years of social compacts, and during that period of time, we had the worst load shedding we've ever seen, riots that rival world wars, the highest unemployment rates. Yeah, I'm starting to think, deep down, Byron, like it's just a sense that I have that the social compact's complete bullshit. But, I could be wrong. But,
Might be.
I could be wrong. I mean, I've never said this before publicly that I could be wrong, which is very rare. But I'm starting to think the social compact is bullshit. Do I go to the Human
Mm.
Rights Commission for saying that? I don't know. Hope not.
Well, I don't know, man. Is that a hate speech? What you've just said right there, or is that treason? Might be treason, mate.
Might be treason. That's why I'm a refugee in Portugal for now. For now. But yes, Arab Spring in South Africa. No, no. I fully disagree with that notion. I think what we are facing is just decay. As always, we are just facing decay
Mm.
and the obliteration of this nation state as we know it. For the most part, doesn't exist in 80% of the country, and I think it will cease to exist in 100% of the country within the next 3 to 5 years. And that is something that should be extremely welcomed by all of us because if there's no state, there's nothing to revolt against. Let's be honest.
If there's no state, there's no one to repress you.
Yeah, yeah. Come to Portugal, feel repressed. You have to drive at 50 kilometers per hour. It's terrible. No one wants to live like
Yeah,
this.
and the speed cameras every 3 seconds, and if you actually do speed, they actually catch you. It's not like that speed camera where the camera inside the box has been stolen,
Yeah,
or there's no film because they didn't pay the contractor, or even if they did pay the contractor, the guy's not driving out there to get the film anyway. And by the time he does drive out there to get the film, the box will probably be stolen or set on fire. So
that's
things there actually work.
yeah, and it's a terrible thing when things work. You don't want it in your life. you,
Mm-mm,
you really
mm-mm.
don't. So anyway, in conclusion, no to the Arab Spring. I think it's bullshit. What we've basically it's going to be an enclave system like the one we've been saying for the past 5 years on this bloody channel. So don't worry about the Arab Spring. Just make yourself state resistant, state proof, and you'll be absolutely fine as always.
I agree.
There we go. We agree. Thanks for watching, everyone. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye.